over, so before we continue with questions and comments, or start comments, questions and comments, do we agree that item 6 will be treated as an exempt item on the basis of paragraphs 8 and 9 as outlined in the appendix? Is that all agreed? I see lots of hands shaking there. That's fine. So we'll move on to any questions, and we'll do questions first. Does anyone have any questions of the officers? No. Councillor Fotheringham has. Any further questions? No. Councillor.
Thank you, Provost. I hope I put this over correctly, but I realise why we've got to do this and align us with national policy. And we're hearing Mr Daly saying if we don't do it, then it's likely to cost us a lot more and the recycling rates will probably go down. But as you know, my ward does not have a recycling centre. So I'm wondering, Mr Daly, would it be possible, and it's a high percentage of elderly people too, would it be possible to have slightly more bins maybe per sort of measure of area than the boroughs that do have recycling centres, because people will go if they're taking down garden waste or, you know, wood and things like that, all the sort of general stuff. They'll get rid of their glass at the recycling centres, which they've got the opportunity to do. My constituents don't. So it's just maybe a reassurance that we could have extra bins per sort of measure of area in Moneyfeet and Sidlaw. Thank you.
Councillor Fordham, I'd like to think that we'll provide a good and adequate supply for all our towns and boroughs. What I can say is that Moneyfeet and Sidlaw, you know, will definitely make sure, endeavour to identify locations, and I think in the sediment reduction, just to make it as convenient as we possibly can. As I said, I think to say that, you know, we'll put more into Moneyfeet and Sidlaw suggests that we could do likewise others, whereas I think we would just rather endeavour to provide an adequate supply for all our towns and boroughs. But as I said, definitely endeavour to do that for the Moneyfeet and Sidlaw ward along with all others.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fotheringham. Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It's a question for Mr Daly again. Your communication about, you know, recycling is going to be really important if this is passed today. Can you tell us what is in line for encouraging people to recycle their food waste?
Yes, I will certainly try, Councillor Beattie. I would highlight, and it's referenced in the report, is in terms of the purple bin, the non-recyclable bin, studies we've done consistently shows that around a third of the contents is food waste, and that is arguably where we have the biggest opportunity, shall we say, to increase our recycling rate if we could encourage and convince more people to recycle their food waste. And there's definitely a strong argument to do it because we're able to generate electricity and a fertiliser substitute from sending it to an anaerobic digester plant. In terms of how we will aim to do that, as always, we'll try and convince and encourage to do it for the environmental reasons, which I just referenced, and we'll try and do that through our communications. But I would also highlight what I think could be seen as a bold step is that we will introduce and apply the policy that if there is non-recyclables in the in the non-recyclable purple bin, including food waste, at an unacceptable level, so we're not talking one banana skin, but an unacceptable level, then our policy that we will seek to apply is that we won't collect that bin, and that is another route to try and increase the amount of recycling, food recycling in particular. And also, as stated in the report, we're actually extending the food service to the number of households, and we're rolling it out to areas out with our towns. At the moment, it's only our towns that receive the food collection. So again, that will naturally increase the amount of food we can recycle.
Councillor Proctor.
Thank you, Provost. Mr Daly, my question is very similar to Councillor Fotheringham. Kirriemuir and Dean, again, no recycling centre. closed down, as was Money Faith's. And the only difference really in Kirriemuir, very, very hilly, and I, again, thinking of the elderly people, and this sort of terrain, the geography of the town, exacerbates the sort of disposal of glass. How are we going to manage to ensure that there are glass collection points or drop-off points, whatever you want to call them, in areas which would negate and help elderly people to do it? Because, Angus, as you well know, top of the league in recycling in Scotland, and I'd hate to see us dropping further down the league.
I'll let Mr Daly reiterate his comments to Councillor Fotheringham.
Yeah, I think I would just reference my response to Councillor Fotheringham earlier. The only thing I would add is that part of the funding that we've received is for staff support to do these assessments. So we've recognised the importance that we have the resource to survey and identify the locations that are best, so that we can try and put these in the most convenient locations for residents.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Provost. A question for Mr Daly. All of the new bins that are being delivered, it states in the report, they're all going to be 240 litre bins. A lot of people I've spoken to that maybe live by themselves find that these big bins, they struggle to fill them for most collections, so they can miss a collection and it doesn't cause them any issues. So is there the possibility of having a smaller 140 litre bin if people were to request that rather than the bigger bins? And if that was possible, would that work out cheaper, or are the bins the same price regardless of their size?
A 240 litre bin is more expensive, the unit price, than a 140 litre bin, but you have to bear in mind, the economies of scale. When the orders that we're buying them in, they'll be far cheaper. If we were to have to start ordering smaller supplies of 140 litres, then the value would reduce. Again, obviously we'll have many years' experience in terms of how we manage our stock of recycling bins. What we'll find is that naturally there's a turnover. I'm speaking just across all our approximately 60,000 households. There is a natural turnover of households, and where putting 140 litre might be suitable for the current occupier, the next occupier may find that that isn't suitable, and it just isn't really the logistics and the pragmatism of trying to offer 240 or 140 litre. It's just, and this we can speak from experience, it's just very challenging. And as I said, from a cost perspective, is that we deliver best value by we order large quantities at a time, and buying smaller quantity, 140 litres, it reduces the difference in price between the smaller and the larger bin.
Thank you for that, Mr Daly. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Provost. So we've had briefing sessions, and I know this question's kind of been answered. So a lot of people have got concerns about where they're going to keep this extra bin. And Mr Daly has said that there is, money available to do groundworks, but that'll only be on council tenancies. So I've had a lot of private owners that just don't have anywhere to keep the bin. They just don't. And a lot of them are saying that they're going to have to decline the blue bin, so therefore it is going to go into the general waste. I don't know what's the solution to that.
I see that's slightly a question, but I'll let Mr Daly try and answer that.
Again, we know from experience there's such a variety of housing type and stock, and whether it's road end collections or communal collections at flats. We do have a massive challenge in terms of how we do the best fit for the particular circumstances. Again, just similar to what I said before, part of the funding we've received is that staff resource to liaise with occupiers, tenants, to try and find the best solution that we can, and it's difficult to speak about specifics until we see it. I think the only commitment I can give is that we will try and work with whether it's landlords, tenants, occupiers of houses, to try and do the very best we can to provide a suitable location for their extra bin.
Councillor Doran.
Yeah, thank you. And I mentioned engagement on the last item, and I'm just going to mention it again on this one regarding the feedback. I wanted to just double check, was this the survey only available online for people to respond to within this? Because again, I know it's difficult to get engagement, but it is low. I think it's just over 3% if you're working on 60,000 households in Angus. So I just wanted to double check on that. Thanks.
I'd quite like to bring in my colleague Suzanne Austin, who led the consultation on that. I do know that we did in person as well as online, but I think she could answer that better.
Yeah, indeed. So we were very conscious from the outset that we needed to make the survey available to all. So we had paper copies available for collection from access offices and other council offices, libraries, etc. We had staff members there on site available to assist anybody to fill in online form version if they wanted, or they could take paper copy away with them. We use communities officers who were widely engaging on a face-to-face basis with community groups and persons, and they were advertising the availability of themselves to be able to assist with filling out forms, providing paper copies. We also asked our community councils to engage with their local residents and assist anybody who needed help in the local area to fill in a form, or just let us know if any further assistance is required.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bell.
It was just to say somebody's mic's obviously left on. There's a lot of reverb, and I found that really difficult to hear. Thanks.
Can everyone make sure, there is definitely an echo in here, can everyone make sure that their microphones are on mute in the chamber as well as at home? Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Yep, thanks, Provost. Yeah, I just wondered what consideration was given to the Angus Street Charter during the making of these proposals, and as a council, can you just clarify, are we asking people to use their car more or less for shorter journeys, and also what consideration or what environmental impact assessment has been done in terms of whether there will be that increase and impact on environment with more car journeys, as has been asked, in terms of people having to then take their glass bottles and jars to a recycling point, and what consideration has been given to the fact that in Angus we have a high increase in trips and falls amongst the older population, and some of the challenges that there might be and the risks that there might be with them having to take on foot their glass jars and bottles.
Yeah, as I said, it's something we'll have had to carefully consider how we best put the network of glass recycling points. I think your question, there was a few aspects to it, but I think the first one was about our consideration of additional travel. I think, well, our message is that to make use of the nearby glass recycling points will be put out. Hopefully they will be convenient enough to go there by foot. However, we'll also be providing them in places where people regularly visit, whether that's a church hall or a supermarket or similar, and we would encourage people to combine their trip with their glass, which the feedback we've had from other local authorities who are further down the line, and in some cases been doing this for many years, seems to be successful. So that's very much what we'll be encouraging and looking for people to do. With that in mind, it's difficult to quantify the environmental impact when we're not quite sure if these are combined journeys where people do take, so they're going to the supermarket, for example, taking their glass anyway. What we do know from studies that I've done is, if we're talking about reducing our carbon impact, the biggest thing we could do is increase our recycling rate. And what the proposals are saying is that we forecast that we will increase our recycling rate. So I think it's a fair conclusion to say that, provided we do so, that there will be a net positive environmental impact from these proposals. I think the other aspect of your question was around, I think it related really to street clutter, which I could understand why is a concern. It's something that we already have issues with in certain areas. What we do find is that it needs our intervention. Often that is, we have officers either letter or door knocks, often both, engage with landlords, tenants about where they should keep their bin or return their bin. Sometimes it requires repeat visits as there's a turnover of staff. What I would say to members is that if you're concerned about a specific area or once the service is rolled out, please bring it to the attention to myself or officers from the waste team, and we will look to take action to try and address any issues regarding street clutter.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, I want to call him Daly, Mr. Daly. Councillor Louise Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. My question is for Graham Daly. I'm just wondering if you could provide more information on how the contamination policy is going to be enforced. Obviously, the report touched upon that staff can only see the top fraction of the bin. Are there going to be random checks carried out? Are people going to be going through other people's, rubbish and belongings, in a sense? I'm just wondering if you can clarify that for us. Thanks.
Yes, and I fully understand why the question's being I switched my mic off, apologies. Yeah, I could understand why that question has been asked. Now, bear in mind that we already have a contamination policy for our recycling bins, and that's been well practiced. And I think the public largely expect that if you put something in your recycling bin that's not meant to be in there, we won't collect it. It's just reversing the thinking, the psychology on this, saying as well, equally, you shouldn't be putting recycling items into your non-recyclable bin. As I referenced earlier, this is costing us over £1 million in terms of not recycling. So, speaking with another council in particular, because there isn't many councils that have done this, as I said, it's quite a bold step, but speaking to another council actually in Northern Ireland who've done it, they saw, without even any enforcement, the simple message this sends is saying that as much as we want you to use your recycling bin properly, we want you to use your non-recyclable bin, and that's what it is, non-recyclables. Now, in terms of the actual practical side of how we do this, well, we'll do it at the moment, and what that involves is that the crew, they do look into the bin, and if they see items that shouldn't be there, they leave a tag with information on there. Now, as tends to be the case with these things, we need to think about soft starts or education in terms of how we could engage with the householder rather maybe than being too harsh, because we'd rather people want to recycle as opposed to force them into it. What we will need to do is revise our current bin policy. This was actually agreed by Communities Committee previously. So when we revise our bin policy, we will provide more information in terms of exactly how we will apply this. But what I would say to you in principle is just similar to what we're already doing with recycling, and also in principle we will try to educate first rather than being too forceful or harsh in how we apply the new procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Right, we'll now move on to questions before we move on to the amendment. So does anyone else, comments. Does anyone have any comments on the report? No, thank you. Right, Councillor Fairweather, can you introduce your... Councillor Scott, has that hand gone up too late, or... No, it's not too late. It's not too late if you have a comment. You would like a comment.
Yeah, I would like a comment. So
you're welcome.
Thank you, Provost. Concerned about consultation about where these things are going to go, where these new neighbourhood recycling points are going to go. Concerned also about who's going to man them, because they will need to be managed. I mean, there's several recycling points or sort of charitable ones, around me, and and you know, everything gets left there. There's one I can think of close by that's for clothes, and there's fridges, there's hoovers, there's all sorts left there. So that's a concern as well. I'm also concerned about the contaminated bins. There is actually places in Brechin where bins are outside all the time, and one I can think of just very close by me is the sheltered housing block. Now, anybody walks past, there's rows and rows of bins out the front of the sheltered housing block. Doesn't look the nicest, but we're now going to add more bins to it. So people do pop things in there all the time. So, you know, is that going to be classed as contamination? I'm worried about the glass. I'm concerned about the glass rate drop-in, which I think has been recognised in the report. So, yeah, just, you know, obviously we know this has got to go ahead, but just lots of concerns around it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Right, Councillor Fairweather, and your amendment.
Thank you, and thank you for giving the time for people to look through it. I'm kind of surprised there are a lot of questions there where the amendment actually covers a lot of these questions. I take it everybody has read it out. If you want me to read them out again, I can do so. I do have an opposition member who would second this, but I'd also like to give the opportunity to the convener. So, do you want me to read it out again, colleagues, or are you happy with the amendment that is as written?
I think we're all happy. I'm not seeing any hands going up saying they want you to read it out again, and I'll therefore ask, who's your seconder from the? Oh, I'm getting a hand up from Councillor Mark MacDonald. I believe he's now seconding your.
As convener of the Communities Committee, I'm happy to second this amendment on the basis that we make a change to the wording. It's not been critical at all. I get the intention, and officers will understand the intention too. But it's using the words, changing the words to people with a disability and the vulnerable, which covers everything that they want to cover, with taking out the words infirm and elderly, which is language that we maybe don't really use now and probably shouldn't use in reports and in motions and things. So on the basis that those changes are made, we are more than happy as the administration group to second the amendment with those changes.
Are you happy with that slight wording change that is more appropriate, Councillor Fairweather?
Yes, no problem with that at all. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. So, with that in mind, we're agreeing the amendment. Thank you very much. Sorry? Is that all agreed that we're agreeing the amendment? Agreed? Agreed unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. And that ends today's meeting. We'll see quite a few people back for P&R at 2 o'clock. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thanks.